Hello, my name is Randy Dobson. I'm an instructor here in the Houston, Texas area, and this video will be on model space and paper space, or model space layout space. Paper space and layout are pretty synonymous, so if you hear me switching back and forth, they do mean the same thing. This video will actually be one of three. Uh, this option or command working in AutoCAD, this setting is not difficult, but it's a little harder to understand. So I want to break it down to three videos and kind of go over a little bit in each one instead of making it one real long, drawn out video. So the first thing that I want to explain is that model space is what you've typically been working in throughout your 2D probably classes. Excuse me. Model is where your objects are drawn. Everything is to scale. Everything measures to scale. Okay, if something's supposed to be 50 feet long, it is 50 feet long. If I draw some circles here, if that's the distance they're supposed to be, then that's what they are. You do not scale things up or down to make them fit. This is actual. If I have a line here that is, let's see how long that is. Let's say it's 10 feet long. Then whenever I list that, it will say 10 feet. Okay, there's no scale ratio in model space. Okay, now when we go to layout or paper space, you will probably see a box here. Let me turn my options back on because you probably are seeing something like this more than anything. You're seeing this little dashed outline and so on. The first thing, as I tell all my students, this viewport here was created by AutoCAD, so I want you to erase it. You see this little dotted outline of a sheet. The way that I get rid of that is go back up to the big red A, go to options, go to display, and uncheck these right here. Hit OK. Now you've got the full black screen. Now typically when I teach this, I usually use my classroom because it's a lot easier for me. But I want you to imagine that model space, you're in a room right now, and you're looking at a wall, and here outside is the real world. This is where everything is to scale. You look out the window, or you look outside, you see somebody, a fence, whatever. That is their size. Whether you walk backwards or forwards, it's still the same size. With layout, if you're in a room with four walls and you can't see the real world, then what you need to do is you need to create a window or a viewport, which would be MV for make view. And I'm just going to do a rectangle. I'm going to show you some other ways of doing it in other videos. But I'm going to knock this window in my wall, and right when I click there, now I can see the outside world. Okay, and if you notice, I can't select on any of that. Why? Well, if you go up to your window, can you touch the outside? No, you have to open the window up. So when you double click, now you've opened that window up, and now you can touch things, you can erase them, you can do whatever you want to with them. I could sit here and draw a donut and put it right there, and I'm going to click outside here to close my window. See, I can't touch anything, but when I go back to the real world down here with model, there's my donut. Okay, now another thing to remember is as you see, I am in this looking at this viewport, and it is closed. If I draw any kind of lines like this, as you see me, I'm just drawing a bunch of lines. Okay, when I go to the real world, you cannot see those lines. Again, I want you to imagine you're in your room, you're looking at a window, and you're marking on that window. Okay, you open the window and walk outside. Well, you can't see those markings because they're behind you. Okay, look at it like that. That this can only be seen because we're in this layout view. I'm just going to erase those. Uh, and also, kind of like with XREF and some other things I've told you, this is the way that AutoCAD intended it to be used, the model space and paper space, bringing your title blocks into the layout. But that doesn't mean that companies all do it that way. Some AutoCAD people were not that familiar with this way, and they've created other ways of doing it. But I guarantee you that once you have a good understanding of how it works, then you can work when in any situation. You can adapt to it very much. So I've got this viewport here, and again, once I open that window up, if I go in there, again, if I reach through my window and I grabbed a tree and I yanked it out of the ground, okay, and erased it, or got rid of it, when I go to model space to real world, there it is gone. Okay. So anything that when you open this window up, anything you do to these objects will be done in the real world. Okay. The viewports, you can use different size viewports. I could take a P line. Let me just draw a P line real quick. Say I needed something to be oddly shaped, a viewport. Okay, I'm gonna erase this one. If I go to M view again, I can say object, pick this object, and see, now that's my viewport. So maybe if I needed to come in here and get it a little closer to that circle like that, or there could be any kind of reason you want to do that. You can now make that viewport any shape you want. Uh, but the rectangle is the typical way. That's the way the older version started out, was doing it that way. So whenever you're working in model space and paper space, remember, I'm going to undo because I'm going to go back to my rectangle just so we've got that. Now, another thing is, you notice when I come in here, I can zoom in and out. Okay, you don't want that. You want to lock your viewport, so you close outside of it. And I'm just going to highlight it here for a second. And if you look down here, here's the scale. And see, I can set this to 1 to 4. And that would be, if you printed this on a piece of paper and used a 1 to 4 scale, that's the way it would look. I'm going to highlight it again, and let's try maybe a 1 to 2. Okay, or I could make it a 1 to 20, which would be even smaller. Or let's just go ahead and go to let's try 1 to 1. And there's 1 to 1, so that means that it's exactly what that is. Now I want to, let me open up something over here, and I want to show you something real quick, so bear with me for a minute. When I'm talking about scales, and I'm going to pull this over, you have different types of scales. Here I've got engineering scales, and if you see even numbers 10, 20, 30, 40, and so on, those are engineer scales. And I'm going to let me just do it like this. Well, that was a bad choice. Let me just try architecture. Then you have architectural scales, which, as you can see, are fractions of an inch. Okay, be it architectural and engineering scales. Uh, those are not taught in any of these courses, more of your technical drawing, but I highly recommend that, here's an engineer scale. This one right here is saying 1 inch equals 20 feet. So a dollar bill is typically around 6 inches long. So on this scale, a dollar bill would measure 120 feet, because 1 inch equals 20 feet. And if it's 6 inches, 6 inches times 20 is 120. Uh, this is where the scaling of the paper space comes into to be. Here's your architectural, where it deals with much more precise fractions of an inch. I will tell you, in this business, this one or this one, you will need to know really, really good. You'll need to know them all because you'll be utilizing different ones for different disciplines or industries, but you will need to learn a scale. If you haven't learned one, I would say go out, buy them at Hobby Lobby. I think they're like $6 each, plastic ones, and watch some videos on them. There's several good ones out there, not ones that I've created, but ones I've seen. But that is what is the going behind these scales over here. When you see this, see here's 1 to 20. Okay, well 1 to 20 is, there's 1 to 20. Okay, if I go over here to architectural, let's see if I can get an architectural one. Probably won't because, yeah, here's 1/16 of an inch. And let's see what we got here. Well, let's go with a quarter of an inch. Here's 3/16 of an inch. Here's a quarter of an inch. And see, here's, well, they aren't showing up on here, but there's, oh, wait a second, let me pull this. There we go. Quarter of an inch equals a foot. Okay, so quarter of an inch right here would equal a foot. So if something was an inch long, it would be 4 feet. 4 feet long because a quarter of an inch equals a foot. So this is where you set that scale, and then once you have it set, if I want to leave it at 1 to 1, then with it highlighted, I right click, go to display locked, yes. See, now when I double click, it won't zoom in or out. Okay, so that's very important to remember. If you have your grid on here, you have to hit F7 while your grid is activated. I mean, your window's activated. If I click outside here, it's just the grid for my layout, not the grid for the model space that's in the viewport. And that's going to conclude this video of model space, paper space, and this will be one of 3. So continue watching the next one. Thank you.